Welcome, sleepy traveler. You've arrived at a quiet space made just for you. My name is Valarie, and I am here to guide you gently into rest, to help ease your mind, soften your body, and drift you toward a peaceful, uninterrupted sleep. Whether your day was long or your thoughts feel a little too loud tonight, let this be your permission to slow down, to breathe, and to simply be. There's nothing more to do now. Just allow my voice to be your guide as we begin this gentle journey toward deep, nourishing rest. If you're new here, subscribe for sleep content like this, and like this video if you find it enjoyable. Let's begin. Take a slow, deep breath in and let it out gently, feeling the air flow out of your body with ease. Allow your lungs to empty completely and notice the sense of lightness that follows. Inhale softly again, filling your chest and belly with calm. And exhale slowly, letting the last remnants of the day drift away. You are here now, in this moment, and that is all that matters. Feel the surface beneath you, holding you fully and without effort. Your body does not need to hold itself up anymore. Notice the gentle heaviness of your arms and legs. They are ready to rest, to soften, to be still. There is no rush and no expectation, just quiet. Bring your attention to your face. Let your forehead soften, smoothing away the lines of the day. Your eyes grow heavy, safe behind your closed eyelids. Release the tiny muscles around your cheeks and nose. Allow your jaw to unhook, your lips to gently part. Even your tongue rests lightly, free from tension. Your whole face is calm and serene now. Take another gentle breath. And shift your awareness to your neck and shoulders. Notice if they are holding on to any tightness. And with your next exhale, let them sink and release completely. A warm heaviness flows from your shoulders into your upper arms. Through your elbows, your forearms, and into your hands. Your fingers rest effortlessly, soft and loose. Your chest rises and falls gently as you breathe. Each inhale brings fresh comfort. Each exhale carries away the last threads of tension. Your heart beats slowly and steadily, a soft rhythm of calm. Bring this awareness to your stomach and your lower back. Let your belly soften and expand as you breathe in. And gently contract as you breathe out. Your lower back sinks into the surface beneath you. Supported, safe, and completely free to let go. Now notice your hips and thighs. Feel the weight of your legs resting heavily. Your muscles are releasing with every breath. Your knees, calves, and shins are soft and relaxed. Your ankles and feet loosen, each toe free of effort. From the top of your head to the tips of your toes, your body is at ease. Imagine now a soft golden light appearing just above your head. It glows with warmth and peace, surrounding you in safety. Slowly, this light begins to drift downward, touching the crown of your head. Where it touches, it releases tension, replacing it with comfort. The light moves across your forehead, over your eyes, your cheeks, and your jaw, down into your neck and shoulders, melting away the last bits of strain. It glides along your arms to your wrists and finally into your fingertips. Everything it touches grows soft, heavy, and calm. The golden light moves to your chest now. Filling your heart with warmth and ease. It flows into your lungs, moving with your breath. Then down to your belly and lower back, releasing every muscle. The light continues down your hips and thighs, to your knees, calves, and ankles, until it reaches your feet and toes, surrounding you completely. You are now cocooned in soft golden light, safe and serene. Take a slow, deep breath and let it go with a long, gentle exhale. You are lighter now, freer, wrapped in the comfort of this moment. In your mind, imagine you are lying beneath a starlit sky. The air is cool and fresh, carrying the scent of night blossoms. The ground beneath you is soft, cradling your body perfectly. Above you, stars sparkle like tiny lanterns in the dark. The night sky stretches wide and endless, peaceful and inviting. A crescent moon rises slowly, bathing the world in silver. Its glow feels protective, like a quiet guardian watching over you. Somewhere in the distance, a stream flows over smooth stones. Its gentle trickle is nature's own lullaby. A soft breeze moves across your skin, carrying whispers of leaves and distant night sounds. Every part of the world around you is calm, safe, and serene. You are a part of this peaceful night, held completely in its embrace. If thoughts appear, imagine them as light clouds in the sky. They drift in soft and slow. And with time, they drift out, leaving the sky of your mind clear again. You do not need to hold on to anything right now. Your only task is to rest, to breathe, to let go. Take another slow inhale and a long, easy exhale. Notice how deeply your body has surrendered to comfort. You are heavy, warm, and safe. Your mind is light, quiet, and free. You are floating now in this gentle stillness, cradled by the night, surrounded by peace. Every star above you hums a lullaby, welcoming your dreams. There's nothing left to do. No effort to make, no direction to go. Only this sweet surrender into the arms of sleep. Good night. Rest deeply and enjoy tonight's bedtime story. The kettle was whistling before I even realized I had set it on the stove. That happens to me more often than I care to admit. My hands and thoughts move ahead of each other, like dancers who haven't rehearsed together but somehow keep finding the same rhythm. I padded across the studio floor in my thick wool socks, the kind with little embroidered flowers my aunt insists on knitting for me every winter. The clay dust that clung to the floorboards made them look perpetually frosted, and my socks carried the traces like snowy footprints. "Tea first," I murmured to myself, filling a chipped mug with steaming chamomile. My mugs are all chipped, you see. Not because I don't know how to make them properly, but because I always keep the imperfect ones. Customers buy the neat, symmetrical cups at the market, but the slightly tilted, slightly wobbly ones, those stay with me. My cupboards look like a family reunion of oddballs. It was that kind of day, soft rain tapping on the roof, a gray light spilling through the tall windows, and the faint smell of clay thick in the air. My studio is little more than a converted garden shed, its shelves stacked high with pottery animals, owls with wide, surprised eyes, foxes with tails coiled around them, hedgehogs so round they look like pastries. They keep me company while I work, their silent stares reminding me to laugh at myself when I fuss too much. That afternoon I was shaping a cat, a simple thing, or so I thought. A curled tail, perked ears, a calm smile. I'd made dozens before, and my hands knew the motions by heart. Roll, pinch, smooth. Add a curve here, press gently there. Clay is honest. It remembers every touch, every hesitation. But when I leaned back to look at the little cat, I frowned. The smile was crooked, not the sweet, serene balance I had imagined, but slanted, one side curling up higher than the other, like it was smirking at me. "Oh, come now," I sighed, tipping my head as though a new angle would somehow straighten it. "You're supposed to look elegant, not cheeky." I considered scraping the smile away and trying again. Precision has always mattered to me. I like symmetry, balance, that sense of everything being just so. My shelves are lined in order, owls together, foxes together, rabbits in a neat row. There's a comfort in that kind of tidiness. Yet when I pressed my finger toward the little cat's mouth, something in me hesitated. The smile wasn't wrong exactly, just different. Crooked, yes, but alive in a way my other animals sometimes weren't. It was as though the cat was keeping a private joke from me, one paw raised mid-prance, ready to tiptoe into mischief. The disappointment softened into something else, a spark of fondness, almost like the way I feel when I find a spoon with an old scratch and imagine the meals it has already served. "You know what?" I whispered, brushing clay dust from its tiny ears. "I think you deserve to stay just as you are." I set the crooked, smiled cat carefully on my shelf between a pair of owlets and a sleepy hedgehog. The shelf creaked in protest, overburdened by my growing menagerie. Still, it felt right, as though the animals shifted to make room for their new companion. I stepped back, squinted, and, without meaning to, I smiled too. "You need a name," I told the little cat. "Can't very well sit up there without one." Names don't always come quickly to me, but this one arrived as naturally as a raindrop sliding down glass. Clover, I decided, because clovers are never perfectly symmetrical, yet they're always lucky to find. Clover, the crooked cat with the lopsided grin. I lifted my mug of chamomile and a little toast. "Welcome to the family." That evening, I couldn't stop glancing over at Clover while I worked on new pieces. I had planned to craft a family of rabbits with long, graceful ears, but each time I shaped a smile, I caught myself chuckling. Somehow every rabbit looked slightly mischievous, as though they'd been gossiping with Clover when I wasn't looking. The rain outside deepened into a steady hum, the kind that makes you want to curl under a quilt with a book. I should have gone inside to the cottage by then, but the studio had wrapped its arms around me, warm with lamplight, fragrant with clay. I sat there longer than usual, tea gone cold, tools scattered, clay drying beneath my fingernails. For the first time in a while, I didn't worry about whether the lines were neat, whether the edges matched. Clover had shown me something I hadn't realized I'd forgotten. Imperfection can be its own kind of charm. The next morning, sunlight streamed weakly through the rain-streaked windows. I pulled open the studio door and was greeted by the smell of damp earth and clay mingling, a scent that felt like home. Clover was waiting exactly where I'd left them, grin still askew, ears perked as if listening to the world's secret laughter. I found myself greeting the cat out loud. "Morning, Clover." I don't usually talk to my pottery. Well, perhaps I do, but usually it's muttering, coaxing, scolding. This was different. This was companionship. I poured fresh tea, opened the windows to let in the cool morning air, and began to hum as I worked. A cheerful tune, something I remembered from childhood but couldn't quite place. The whole studio seemed lighter, as though Clover's grin had worked its way into the wood and stone. By midday, a thought struck me. What if other people felt the same way I did about Clover? Would they see imperfection or charm? I often bring my pieces to the village market, where customers pick through them with curious eyes. They favor the tidy ones, the foxes with sleek lines, the owls with perfectly rounded eyes. But maybe, just maybe, someone out there might look at Clover and feel the same odd fondness I did. The idea warmed me, though I quickly shook my head. Clover was mine now. My crooked cat, my reminder that not every smile has to be even. So instead I tried something new. I began shaping animals with quirks on purpose. A rabbit with one ear flopping lower than the other. A hedgehog whose nose tilted slightly too far left. A bird with wings that didn't quite match. Each time I thought of Clover watching from the shelf, approving with that sly grin. And to my surprise, I felt freer, lighter. My hands moved with playfulness instead of restraint, and laughter slipped out between sips of tea. The studio filled with a family of oddballs, each with its own personality. each brimming with charm I hadn't noticed before. That night, I carried Clover into the cottage and set them on the windowsill above my bed. Outside, the moon hung low, a crooked crescent in the sky, matching Clover's smile perfectly. I curled beneath my quilt, the day's work leaving my muscles pleasantly tired, and whispered, "Good night, Clover." It felt silly, but also right, because in that tiny, lopsided grin, I saw not just clay, but something truer. A reminder that beauty lives in crooked smiles, chipped mugs, uneven stitches, and rainy afternoons where everything feels slightly off but deeply alive. I drifted to sleep with that thought, the rain still tapping gently against the glass, Clover's grin watching over me like a secret I was happy to keep. The day began with jam. Strawberry jam, to be precise, spread thickly across toast I had nearly burned because I was too busy staring at Clover on the windowsill. The crooked-smiled cat seemed to be smirking at my forgetfulness. "You think you're funny, don't you?" I told them, balancing my breakfast plate in one hand while trying to brush crumbs off my lap with the other. Clover, naturally, did not reply, though I swear the slant of that grin deepened in the morning light. It was a chilly sort of morning, the kind that makes you want to linger over tea and wear socks that don't quite match. My studio smelled faintly of yesterday's rain, clay, and chamomile steam. I shuffled in with my toast, humming tunelessly, and set Clover back in their usual spot on the shelf between the owlets and the hedgehog. They looked as though they'd been presiding over the others all night, keeping their lopsided charm on full display. That was when I noticed it. The rabbit sitting beside Clover wasn't quite as tidy as I'd once believed. One ear drooped lower than the other, flopping just enough to ruin the perfect symmetry I had intended. In the past, I might have sighed, set it aside, maybe even hidden it behind sturdier pieces when market day came. But now, well, Clover had changed something. I carried the rabbit down from the shelf, held it up to the light, and tilted my head. The crooked ear made it look thoughtful somehow, like it was listening more intently to whispers only it could hear. "You look like a dreamer," I said, crumbs still clinging to my sweater. "I think I'll call you Lark." Naming it felt good, like lifting a secret into the open and realizing it had been waiting for me to notice. I set Lark next to Clover, and the two of them looked suddenly less like flawed pottery and more like companions sharing an inside joke. Once I started, I couldn't stop. There was the little bird I had once cursed under my breath because its wings refused to curve evenly no matter how many times I reshaped them. One drooped lower than the other, giving it a lopsided look. But under Clover's watchful grin, I saw it differently. The bird looked brave, like it had flown through a storm and was proudly showing its scars. "You're Finch," I declared, balancing the bird on my palm. "The one who always makes it home, even when the wind tries to toss you around." Finch joined the growing company on the shelf, wings uneven and proud. Then there was the fox. Oh, the fox. I had been so annoyed with it weeks ago that I nearly threw it back into the clay bin. Its tail had ended up far too large, so big that it toppled over whenever I tried to stand it upright. But now I picked it up and couldn't help but chuckle. The enormous tail gave it an air of exaggerated pride, like it was showing off. "You," I said, "are Fernwick, the fox who thinks the bigger the tail, the wiser the tale." I propped Fernwick carefully beside the others, wedging a bit of cloth under the tail to keep it from tipping. The fox sat there smugly, as though entirely aware of its own grandeur. By the time the afternoon sun stretched across my workbench, I was knee-deep in dust and laughter. Every piece I had once hidden or dismissed was now being rediscovered. The owl whose left eye was slightly larger than the right became Mira, the one who never misses a detail. The hedgehog whose spikes had hardened unevenly was named Thistle, the shy one with a soft heart. Even a lumpy little turtle I had long ago shoved to the back of the shelf became Mosscap, the old soul who likes to nap in the sun. It was as if the studio itself had woken up. The shelves no longer looked like a warehouse of imperfect goods, but like a gathering of friends at a cozy dinner party, each with a story, each with a flaw that made them more real. And I felt lighter, freer, like I'd been carrying a burden I hadn't even known about, this quiet demand for perfection, and had finally put it down. That evening I brewed another cup of chamomile and sat on the floor with my back against the shelf. The creatures loomed above me in crooked rows, their little imperfections glowing warmly in the lamplight. I told them stories aloud, half to myself, half to them. Lark, you'd be the type to wander off in the meadow, ears cocked to catch the hum of bees. Finch, you'd race the clouds and return just in time for supper. And Fernwick, oh, you'd have everyone convinced your tail was a family heirloom. I laughed until I nearly spilled my tea, and the sound bounced around the tiny studio in a way that made me feel less alone. The more I spoke, the more alive they seemed. Not just pottery anymore, but a family of perfectly imperfect creatures, each carrying their own little story, each reminding me that flaws are not failures, but features. A few nights later, I dreamed of them. In the dream, they had all climbed down from the shelf, Lark's ear twitching as he listened to the crickets, Finch flapping one wing determinedly, Fernwick strutting so proudly his tail nearly swept the floor. Clover, of course, was leading them, that crooked grin glinting in the moonlight. They paraded across my workbench, clinking softly, clay feet tapping out a rhythm like rain on a tin roof. I followed them through the fields, laughing as they darted and danced. They didn't seem broken at all. They seemed whole. So much so that I woke up with the taste of joy lingering in my chest. The next morning I found myself rearranging the shelves again, making space for them not just as pottery but as characters in my little world. Clover stayed at the center, the crooked cat who had started it all. Lark leaned gently against Finch. Fernwick stood tall at the end, and the others filled in like puzzle pieces around them. I stepped back and took it all in. My once lonely studio now felt like a lively gathering place, and I realized, quite suddenly, that I didn't want to hide them anymore. Perhaps I wouldn't take them to market, but perhaps I wouldn't need to. Maybe it was enough that they were here, keeping me company, teaching me lessons in their silent way. I reached for my sketchbook and began drawing them, one by one. Clover's crooked grin, lark's tilted ear, finch's uneven wings. I wrote their names beneath each sketch as if writing them into being. Before I knew it, the page was filled with stories, tiny notes about their personalities, little hints of who they were. And as I closed the sketchbook, a thought stirred quietly inside me. What if there were more? What if every imperfection could be named, claimed, celebrated? That evening, I poured myself another cup of tea, wrapped a blanket around my shoulders, and whispered into the lamplit studio. Clover, lark, finch, fernwick, mira, thistle, mosscap, welcome home. The words felt silly, tender, but also true, because this wasn't just a shelf of pottery anymore. It was a family, a perfectly imperfect family. And for the first time in a long while, I didn't just feel like an artist shaping clay. I felt like a storyteller too. The morning began with sunlight the color of honey, spilling across my work table and turning every bit of clay dust into glitter. I was halfway through shaping a vase, tall, neat, symmetrical, the sort of thing people in the village usually preferred, when I heard a knock at the door. Not the sharp, impatient knock of a delivery boy, but a soft one, 3 taps, a pause, then another. I wiped my hands on my apron, leaving behind streaks of clay like ghostly fingerprints, and opened the door. There stood Mrs. Alder, my neighbor from down the lane. She's the kind of woman whose hair is always pinned perfectly, whose scarves always match her shoes. She has been buying my polished pieces for years. The smooth bowls, the straight-lined vases, the candle holders with tidy rims. "Good morning, Isolde," she said, stepping in before I had the chance to clear the clay from my cheek. "I thought I'd stop by to see if you had another vase for my mantel. Something refined, you know, elegant." I nodded and led her into the studio, where the sunlight now stretched all the way to the shelves. My usual market pieces were lined up in a neat row on the left, waiting to be fired. But the right side, the side I had rearranged just the day before, was crowded with Clover and the rest of the imperfect family. Clover, with their crooked grin, perched proudly at the center. Lark leaned sideways, ear drooping gently. Finch puffed uneven wings. Fernwick's tail sprawled like a plume. Mira's mismatched eyes glowed under dust motes. I saw Mrs. Alder's gaze move toward the refined vases first, her eyes scanning critically as always. But then she stopped. She blinked, tilted her head, and drifted toward the other shelf. "Oh," she said softly, pausing in front of Clover. "Oh my." My stomach twisted. Would she call them sloppy? Careless? Would she ask why I hadn't smoothed the clay, corrected the proportions, fixed the flaws? I braced myself for the lecture I half expected. but instead, she reached out and touched Clover's crooked smile with a fingertip. "This reminds me," she whispered, "of the toy cat I had as a child. Its ear was chewed by our dog, and the paint on its face had nearly rubbed away. But I loved it, more than the perfect dolls, because it was mine, because it was real." I blinked, my mouth opening, then closing. I hadn't expected that. "They're lovely," Mrs. Alder continued, her eyes shining in a way I rarely saw. "Not because they're polished, but because well, they feel alive." I laughed awkwardly, rubbing the back of my neck. Alive is one word for them. Crooked is another. "Crooked can be beautiful," she said firmly. "May I buy this one? Clover, did you call it?" I froze. Part of me wanted to say yes. The other part wanted to clutch Clover to my chest and never let go. Clover was the first, the one that started it all. I couldn't possibly. Instead, I said, "Clover isn't for sale, but perhaps one of the others." I gestured toward Finch and Fernwick, their uneven wings and too big tail glowing warmly in the sun. Mrs. Alder smiled knowingly, as if she understood my reluctance. She chose Finch, the uneven-winged bird. "This one," she said, cradling it gently. "It reminds me of when I learned to ride a bike. I fell more than I rode, but I was proud of every scrape." When she left with Finch wrapped carefully in cloth, I stood in the studio in stunned silence. My heart thudded oddly, not just with the ache of parting, but with the realization that someone else had seen what I had seen. The honesty in imperfection. The next afternoon, another knock. This time it was Mr. Pell from the bakery. He usually bought my mugs for the cafe tables. Sturdy, matching, reliable. But when he spotted Fernwick, his eyes widened. "Well, would you look at that?" he said, pointing to the fox with the oversized tail. "That looks just like the stuffed toy my daughter carried everywhere until it fell apart. Tail nearly bigger than the fox itself. She wouldn't sleep without it." He chuckled, his laugh booming in the tiny studio. "Mind if I take Fernwick home? My daughter's coming to visit this weekend. She'll get a kick out of it." I hesitated for only a second this time before wrapping Fernwick for him. As he left, I noticed Clover grinning wider, as though pleased that their family was finding homes. Word spread faster than I expected. Perhaps Mrs. Alder told her bridge club, or maybe Mr. Pell mentioned it to customers at the bakery. Whatever the case, within a week, more villagers began stopping by, not just for vases and bowls, but to ask if I had any more of those little characters. A young mother chose Mira, the owl with mismatched eyes, saying her son would love how it looked like it was always winking. An older man picked Thistle, the uneven, spiked hedgehog, because it reminded him of how his hair never quite behaved. Even Mosscap, the lumpy turtle, found a home with a woman who admitted she liked things a little off-kilter. I watched in awe as my once dismissed pieces, the ones I had hidden or nearly discarded, became treasures in the eyes of others. One evening, after a particularly busy day, I sat on the studio floor again. Clover the only one left beside me. The shelves felt bare without the whole family, though sketches of them remained in my notebook. I sipped tea, the lamplight soft and golden, and spoke aloud to Clover. "Do you realize what you've done?" I asked. "You started this. You and that crooked grin. Now half the village has a piece of you." Clover stared back, grin forever tilted, as though saying, "Of course I did. What took you so long to notice?" I laughed, the sound bubbling out of me like spring water. For so long I had measured success by straight lines and smooth edges, by how well my pieces matched some invisible ideal. But here was proof, warm and undeniable. People weren't drawn to perfection. They were drawn to honesty, to the reminder that beauty lives in the uneven, the unexpected, the worn and loved. The next market day, I decided to do something daring. Instead of displaying only my refined pots and symmetrical mugs, I arranged a small table just for the perfectly imperfect animals. Clover sat in the center, not for sale, but as the heart of the collection. Around them, I placed the new ones I had shaped in recent days. A rabbit with feet slightly too large, named Poppy. A bear whose ears didn't quite match, named Bramble. A tiny mouse with a tail that curled more than it should, named Whisk. The crowd that gathered surprised me. Children tugged at their parents' sleeves, pointing at Bramble's uneven ears with delight. Couples lingered, chuckling over Whisk's corkscrew tail. People smiled, really smiled. The kind of smiles that crinkled their eyes. The kind that reminded me of Mrs. Alder's childhood toy, worn but loved. By midday, every imperfect animal had found a new home. And though the polished pot still sold, it was clear where the real joy lay. That night I carried Clover back to the cottage and set them on the windowsill above my bed, as I often did. The moonlight caught their crooked grin, and I whispered, "Thank you." Because Clover had taught me something I'd never quite understood before. Perfection may impress, but imperfection connects. And perhaps, in a world so eager to smooth out every flaw, what people needed most was a reminder that beauty isn't always symmetrical. It started with a shelf, just one shelf, but it didn't take long before the idea grew like ivy across the walls of my little studio. I remember standing in front of Clover one morning, mug of steaming chamomile in my hands, gazing at that crooked grin as if it were an unspoken dare. The other pieces, lark with the tilted ear, finch with the uneven wings, fernwick with the tail too big for his own good, were already gone to their new homes. But Clover remained, steady and sly, urging me on. "All right," I said aloud, blowing on my tea. "You win. If you're staying here, we may as well make this official." And so I cleared out a corner of the studio, the corner by the window, where sunlight puddles on the floor and dust motes dance like confetti. I pushed aside the tidy rows of symmetrical vases, shifting them to the back shelves, and laid down a fresh cloth on a low table. It wasn't much at first, but it felt like setting a stage. The next step was naming, not just in my head this time, but properly, with cards. I cut small rectangles of heavy paper and sat at my workbench, dipping my pen into ink, giggling to myself as I wrote. Clover, the cat who smiles like he knows something you don't. Lark, a rabbit who listens for the secrets only bees can tell. Finch, a bird with uneven wings, always finding its way home. Fernwick, a fox who insists the bigger the tail, the taller the tale. Mira, the owl who never blinks at the truth. Thistle, a hedgehog who hides her softness in plain sight. Mosscap, a turtle who naps wherever the sunbeam falls. I propped the cards in front of each figure, the words as crooked and playful as the creatures themselves. Suddenly they weren't just clay. They were a chorus of stories, a small community that had grown right under my nose. When I stepped back and looked at the display, something in me hummed with joy. It was no longer just a studio corner. It was a gallery of imperfections. Word spread, as it always does in small villages. Neighbors who came to buy mugs or vases soon lingered by the gallery corner. Children pressed their noses to the window before I even opened the door, eager to see if any new characters had arrived. One girl, no taller than the workbench, asked shyly if she could read the cards herself. She sounded out the words with her finger tracing each letter. Thistle, a hedgehog, who hides her softness. She looked up at me with wide eyes. That's me sometimes, she whispered. I nearly melted right there. Her mother bought Thistle on the spot, but I insisted the little girl keep the card. Every gallery visitor deserves a story to take home, I said, and the smile that bloomed on her face made my chest ache in the best way. The collection grew quickly. Each day I found myself shaping new companions, not polished, not corrected, but honest. A duck with feet too large became Paddlefoot, who loves every puddle. A bear with ears lopsided turned into Bramble, who hears two sides to every tale. A mouse whose tail curled too tightly became Whisk, who never loses his way in the grass. I wasn't just making pottery anymore. I was listening for the quirks that wanted to be seen, the flaws that carried whispers of stories. And instead of fighting them, I followed. The gallery corner swelled until it wasn't just a corner anymore. I hung a little sign above the space, painted in playful letters, "The Gallery of Imperfections." Visitors chuckled when they read it, but always, they left warmer than when they had come. I noticed something else, too. My own hands felt freer. For years they had moved with careful restraint, pinch here, smooth there, perfect the symmetry. But now? My fingers danced in clay without fear. If a line wavered, I let it. If an ear flopped, I shaped it gently instead of pressing it into obedience. And in that freedom, my creatures seemed more alive. Their quirks were no longer accidents to fix, but invitations to imagine. One evening, I caught myself humming as I worked. The kind of humming that comes when your heart is lighter than you realized. The clay under my palms felt softer, kinder. as though it too had let go of needing to be perfect. Soon, villagers began leaving notes pinned to the edge of the gallery table. Please make a bird with a bent beak. It reminds me of one I cared for as a child. Could you shape a dog with one ear folded? My old shepherd looked just like that. It became a conversation. Their memories, my clay, Clover watching over us all like a crooked-smiled patron saint of imperfection. I began writing not just names and quirks on the cards, but small lessons too. Poppy, a rabbit with big feet, teaching us that stumbling still carries us forward. Bramble, a bear with uneven ears, reminding us to listen twice before speaking once. Whisk, a mouse with a curled tail, proving that circles can still lead us home. The gallery wasn't just a display anymore. It was a place of reflection, of laughter, of tenderness. One rainy afternoon, Mrs. Alder returned. She stood in front of Clover for a long time, her umbrella dripping on the mat. "You know, Isolde," she said finally, "this corner of your studio feels like walking into a storybook I once loved and forgot. I come here and I feel lighter, as if the world doesn't demand so much neatness after all." Her words stayed with me long after she left. Because she was right, my studio had changed. It wasn't simply a workshop. It was a gathering place, a reminder that crooked smiles, uneven wings, and lopsided tails carried their own kind of truth. At night, after the lamps dimmed and the rain tapped the roof, I sometimes sat in the gallery with just Clover for company. I imagined the shelves whispering to one another, Poppy dreaming of fields, Bramble humming lullabies, Finch boasting about outflying storms. Their voices were quiet, but they filled the room, and in their chorus I felt less alone. It struck me then that imperfection wasn't just about the clay. It was about me too. About how often I'd tried to make myself neat, polished, symmetrical in the eyes of others. But here, in the gallery, I could breathe unevenly, laugh too loud, wear mismatched socks, and still belong. By the end of that month, my studio no longer smelled only of clay and tea. It smelled of visitors' laughter, of rain-wet coats hung by the door, of the ink from cards drying with playful truths. It sounded of children reading aloud, of adults sighing in relief, of my own humming as my hands moved freely. The gallery of imperfections had grown beyond the shelf, beyond the table, beyond even my own expectations. And with each new creature added, with each card written, I felt myself growing too. Not taller, not straighter, but freer. That night, as I carried Clover back to the cottage windowsill, I paused before setting him down. His grin caught the moonlight, crooked and proud. "You know," I whispered, "I used to think perfection was the goal, but you've shown me it was never perfection I was chasing. It was connection." Clover's smile didn't change, of course, but somehow, in the silver light, I felt it deepen, as though he were nodding. And I drifted to sleep knowing that tomorrow and the day after and the day after that, there would always be room for another imperfect story, The evening light stretched long and golden across my studio, pooling on the floorboards like warm honey. I had just finished wiping clay from my hands, the earthy scent lingering even as I reached for my teacup. Outside, the air was turning crisp, the sky dressed in streaks of lavender and rose, and the faint hum of crickets drifted in through the open window. It had been a long day. 3 visitors, a dozen mugs sold, 2 children begging their mother for the new lopsided duck named Paddlefoot. My shelves, once crowded with symmetrical vases and neat bowls, now carried a different energy entirely. The gallery of imperfections had grown, alive with character, brimming with quirks and crooked smiles. And though the visitors had gone home and the lamps were dimming, the warmth lingered, like an aftertaste of laughter. I stood by the gallery corner, my eyes landing, of course, on Clover. There he sat, as always, the crooked grin tilted just enough to make me smile back. It was hard to believe that once upon a time I'd nearly smoothed that grin away, that I'd almost thrown him back into the clay bin and let him vanish without a trace. What a strange thought, that a single moment of hesitation, of letting something imperfect be, could ripple outward until it reshaped not only my work, but the way I see the world. I pulled the stool closer and sat before him, resting my chin in my hands. "Well, Clover," I said softly, "it looks like you were right all along. You were never a mistake. You were the beginning." The room seemed to agree. Around me, the imperfect creatures, Fernwick with his proud tail, Lark with his drooping ear, Finch with his uneven wings, Bramble with his mismatched ears, glowed in the lamplight like a small council of storytellers. Each one bore its own scar, its own quirk, its own reminder. And together they told me something I had always known deep down but never had the courage to say, that flaws are not failures. They are fingerprints. They are the brushstrokes that make us unforgettable. I thought of Mrs. Alder, who had cradled Finch as though holding her own childhood in her hands, of Mr. Pell, whose booming laugh filled the room as he carried Fernwick away to surprise his daughter, of the little girl who had whispered, "That's me sometimes," when she read Thistle's card. None of them had come here looking for perfection. They had come seeking something truer, something that mirrored their own uneven stories, their own worn edges. And they had found it in these creatures who dared to be imperfect. And so had I. I leaned back, sipping the last of my tea, now lukewarm but comforting. The soft rain began again outside, pattering against the roof in a rhythm that always soothed me. I closed my eyes for a moment and breathed in the scent of clay, ink, and chamomile. Gratitude swelled in my chest, quiet but steady, like a lantern's glow. Gratitude for Clover's smile, for every quirk I had once despised, for every uneven line that had taught me how to see beauty differently. It struck me then that this was no longer just about pottery. It was no longer just about clay shaped into rabbits and foxes and birds. It was about a way of living. For years I had measured myself by neatness, by precision. by how closely I could match the invisible standard of good enough. I thought if I worked harder, smoothed more, balanced better, maybe I would be worthy of admiration. But the truth was always waiting for me in the crooked grin of a clay cat. Clover had shown me what I'd been too afraid to admit, that perfection is brittle. It breaks when pressed too hard. But imperfection, that is flexible, that is honest. That bends and wobbles and still finds a way to stand. If I could love Clover's crooked smile, could I not also love my own uneven edges? My tendency to hum off key, my shelves full of chipped mugs, the way I sometimes trip over my own feet when I'm too lost in thought. Perhaps these too are not failures but features. Perhaps they are what make me unforgettable. I rose from the stool and crossed the room, closing the shutters against the rain. The studio glowed now only with lamplight, warm and golden, a safe cocoon. On impulse, I took a fresh card from the stack at my workbench and wrote carefully in ink, Clover. The cat whose crooked smile reminds us that flaws are not failures, but the marks that make us memorable. I placed the card in front of him and sat back again, my throat tightening with a lump I hadn't expected. There, I whispered. Now your story is complete. And so is mine, at least this chapter of it. I don't know how long I sat there, listening to the rain, staring at that crooked smile. But when I finally rose to close the studio for the night, my heart felt different, lighter, steadier. I dimmed the lamps, locked the door, and carried Clover with me into the cottage as I always did. I placed him on the windowsill above my bed, the moonlight streaming in to catch his grin just so. Outside, the rain slowed, the world hushed. I curled under my quilt, smiling up at him. You'll stay with me always, I said, and I'll keep making more because this isn't just art anymore. It's a way to live. The words felt true, truer than anything I'd said in a long time. I would keep shaping the clay, not into perfect replicas, but into little stories of imperfection. I would keep naming them, celebrating them, letting them remind me and anyone who visited that beauty lives in crooked smiles, in uneven wings, in tales too big for balance. And I would let that truth seep into my own life too, into every mistake, every stumble, every scar I've carried. Because if a crooked cat could spark a gallery of imperfections, then surely my own uneven edges could hold meaning too. As I drifted toward sleep, Clover's grin glowed faintly in the moonlight. Not mocking, not careless, but steady, patient, knowing. The kind of smile that lasts, not because it is perfect, but because it is honest. And I realized, with a quiet gratitude that spread through every part of me, that this was all I needed to remember. Flaws are not failures. They are the stitches that hold our stories together. They are what make us unforgettable. I closed my eyes, the rain whispering against the glass, Clover watching from his perch, and thought, this is how I will live. Crooked, imperfect, free. And with that, I smiled my own crooked smile into the dark and slept. That brings tonight's bedtime session to a gentle close. Thank you so much for spending this quiet moment with me. If you'd like, feel free to stay and drift deeper into sleep with the soft sounds of rain in the background.